Most gardeners slap oil, stain, or a plastic liner on a raised bed and call it protection. That mistake quietly destroys beds from the inside out. Sealed wood that can't breathe stays damp, fungi move in, and rot starts exactly where you can't see it, right at the soil line. 2 or 3 seasons later, the boards are soft, beds bow outward, and all that carefully built soil ends up on the ground. This isn't bad luck, it's bad protection strategy. What actually works is not sealing wood like furniture, it's changing the internal conditions so fungi can't digest it while still letting moisture move in and out naturally. That's what this natural paint does, and I've tested it across raised beds, in-ground borders, greenhouse benches, and high-humidity hydroponic frames. You know, calling it paint is a bit misleading, but honestly it helps people understand the goal. This mixture doesn't just sit on the surface like a film. It actually soaks in, bonds with the fibers, and hardens slowly inside the wood. So, think of it more like feeding the wood something fungi can't tolerate rather than, coating it in armor. That distinction really matters because surface coatings crack, peel, and trap moisture. Penetrating treatments, on the other hand, extend lifespan. I use cheap pine on purpose. If a method works on pine, it works on almost anything, really. I'm not interested in theory. I'm interested in beds that stay solid year after year without leaching chemicals into food crops. The real enemy of raised bedwood is biology, not rain. Rain doesn't actually rot wood. Fungi do. Moisture, well, it just gives them access. Most advice, honestly, focuses on keeping water out, but that can really backfire. Wood that never dries, that's just the perfect fungal buffet. What you really want is wood that gets wet, then dries quickly, while being chemically hostile to decay organisms. So, that's the role of this natural paint, really. It disrupts fungal metabolism and controls moisture movement, all without sealing the pores shut. Now let me share the exact recipe I rely on and why every single part matters. I always start with borax or boric acid. Boron, you see, interferes with fungal enzyme systems. Fungi just can't digest cellulose efficiently when it's present. So I dissolve 1 cup of borax into 1 gallon of very hot water. Cold water just won't dissolve it fully, and undissolved boron doesn't really penetrate wood evenly. Once it's fully dissolved, I add 1 gallon of raw linseed oil. Not boiled linseed oil, mind you. Boiled versions often contain metallic dryers that, honestly, I don't want anywhere near soil. Raw linseed oil cures slowly, which actually allows deeper penetration before it hardens. I mix aggressively until it emulsifies. It will separate if left sitting, so I stir or shake right before application. The texture looks like thin paint, which is why people remember it that way. Application timing matters. I don't apply this in direct sun or to bone-dry wood. Slightly damp wood opens the grain and, pulls the mixture inward. Early morning or a shaded workspace is honestly ideal. I brush it on heavily, starting with end grain and the lower third of the board. End grain is where rot always begins. The first coat usually disappears in minutes. That's what you want. The second coat, applied the next day, tells you how saturated the wood is. If it still drinks it in, apply a third. After the final coat, I let the boards cure for at least 3 days in warm weather and up to a week if it's cool. The surface should feel dry, not sticky. At that point, the oil has begun to polymerize inside the wood. For a standard 4 by 8 foot raised bed using pine, I treat every board on all sides, but I focus effort where failure usually happens. The interior faces, bottom edges, and every cut end get extra attention. When installing, I don't set boards directly onto mud. A thin layer of gravel or coarse sand under the frame breaks constant moisture contact. Inside the bed, I avoid piling wet soil or mulch against the top edge of the wood. Small design choices stack protection. Beds treated this way have stayed structurally sound at the soil line for years, even under heavy irrigation and wet seasons. So, let's talk about why oil-only, why wax-only, and plastic liners just don't work in the long run. You see, oil on its own might slow down water, but honestly, it does nothing to stop fungi once they've taken hold. Wax, well, it tends to crack and flake over time, which, really undermines its effectiveness. Plastic liners, on the other hand, actually trap moisture right up against the wood, and that creates, basically, a permanent damp zone. I've, cut open lined beds and actually found rot that was worse behind the plastic than on untreated wood. This mixture works because, well, it doesn't pretend water is the only problem. It actually changes the biological equation inside the wood itself. Using this treatment in hydroponic and greenhouse environments is, honestly, quite important. Hydroponic systems are, harder on wood than soil gardens. I use the same recipe, but, I apply 3 coats and allow a full week of curing. I also design systems so wood never sits in standing water. Even treated wood shouldn't be submerged, really. Airflow matters more than anything in enclosed environments, honestly. On treated pine frames in greenhouses, mold growth is minimal and structural integrity holds far longer than untreated or surface-sealed wood. Addressing concerns about boron near food crops. This question always comes up. Boron is a micronutrient. Too much in soil is harmful. But boron bound inside wood fibers is not the same as soluble boron fertilizer. I've soil-tested beds treated this way over multiple seasons and, boron levels remain within normal agricultural ranges. The key is that the boron is actually locked into the wood, not just dumped into the soil. If you're still cautious, it's wise to keep treatment below soil grade and avoid soaking treated wood unnecessarily. That's good practice regardless, really. Now let me tell you when I wouldn't use this natural paint. Honestly, I wouldn't apply it on decorative furniture or anything that's meant to be refinished often. This is really about functional protection. I also wouldn't put it on wood that's already soft or rotting. You can slow decay, but you just can't reverse it. So, always start with sound wood, treat it correctly, and, design the bed so moisture doesn't stagnate. There's a good reason why this method has truly earned a permanent place in my garden. Honestly, it just works so well, and I wouldn't want to be without it now. I've rebuilt beds. I've tried shortcuts. I've watched untreated pine fail exactly where everyone says it will. This natural paint works because it respects how wood, water, and microbes actually behave in a garden. It's not flashy. It doesn't promise immortality, it simply extends the useful life of raised beds long enough that rebuilding becomes a rare event instead of a routine chore. If you care about growing better food and building gardens that improve with time instead of falling apart, subscribe to Gentle Herb Gardening. Share this with someone replacing their beds again this season. Strong gardens start with materials that are treated with the same care as the plants growing in them.